ignore what is happening, and you don't learn from the lessons of the past, you will suffer. Well, we didn't want to put any of our own, certainly in terms of the thematic material, we didn't want to put any of our own baggage. I mean, we had no interest in putting our messages into this movie, but we thought that we should honor Tolkien by putting his messages into it.
Tyrannous reformation of the earth, our place. That is really why he hated machines. Of course, it's perfectly true. He hated the internal combustion engine for perfectly good practical reasons. I mean, noise, congestion, destruction of cities, and many people greatly agree with him now. Into a secondary world that may not be very much more pleasant, but is at any rate very different. And there are terrors as well as beauties in the secondary world. And why should what he offered, if it is escape, not be the escape of the prisoner, which in other contexts is regarded as a very noble thing to try to do, to get away?
There is no such thing as a natural death. Nothing that happens to man is ever natural, since his presence calls the whole world into question. All men must die, but for every man his death is an accident, and even if he knows it and consents to it, an unjustifiable violation.
The road goes ever on and on, down from the door where it began. Now far ahead the road has gone, and I must follow if I can, pursuing it with eager feet, until it joins some larger way, where many paths and errands meet, and whether then, I cannot say.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to a White Cloaks live stream going over the Lord of the Rings Fellowship of the Rings. Hopefully everybody who's here has already watched our first video. If not, that covered chapters 1 through 6 all the way up until the Old Forest, so just prior to chapter 7 in the House of Tom Bombadil. If you haven't read that yet, or if you haven't read at least as far as that, please go watch that video first. We're going to try and limit the spoilers and conversations that we have to basically just the parts of the book that we're talking through. So there you go. There's the rules out of the way. And with that, I'm going to ask to introduce the rest of the panel here. So we'll start with the man, the myth, the legend himself, old Dane Ironfoot, the guy who really started us all together on this White Cloaks journey. So how are you today?
See, I was doing this because I thought you were actually going to introduce Brian in the top left.
Yeah, well, that's why we like you. You're so humble.
To my to my wildest. But then this was someone else. This Lord of the Rings stuff was someone else's idea. Although, guess what I did find, especially for this one?
Mm-hmm. Nice.
There it is.
Nice. I don't actually smoke, but I think I could fake it.
Okay. You can get started. Anybody can.
You're supposed to put it in the side of your mouth, right?
How are you? How are you going to do a Robert Jordan elitist and not pipe smoke?
That's a good question. Yeah,
I can't smoke in my building. They'll like kick me out.
Canada sucks, man. Can I just say that?
Canada blows.
Yeah, even the good parts of Canada kind of sucks. But yeah,
even the price of tobacco up there is ridiculous too.
Oh well.
Well, that's true.
No, I'm doing good. Thanks, Pips. But let's introduce some other people. Everybody knows me.
All right. Alex, how are you today?
I'm doing well.
That's it as well.
That is well.
All right. Well, I am also doing well. I think I responded to this from the chat. I'm drinking whiskey. I'm talking about Lord of the Rings, so it's pretty much a perfect day. So we'll introduce our co-host for this experience, Amanda Manethrin, the guy with the great beard, the fur hat, and every year you just become more, or every week, every episode, you just become more masculine than the last time you were on. Like
he becomes more Canadian. Like he's wearing flannel and fur.
Those two things are at cross purposes, though.
He's putting me to shame.
More masculine and more Canadian. Like, how do you do both of those two things? Okay.
Well,
I'm sorry.
I'll be honest. I'm a little bit disappointed in the lack of blue jacket. You could have had a dead-on Tom Bombadil cosplay for this.
Now there's a stream that I did with Prophet of the Dragon where I had the flaps down and everything. I'm telling you. Hold on. I can unbuckle here.
Hello.
And there we go.
There you go.
There you go. Now
you just have to sing and be whimsical.
Yeah, right. And I need a bird's nest with some shit in it.
Isn't that Radagast? But
that was Radagast. Yes.
Also, a certain troll statue that we'll run into in this conversation, I think. But hey, I just want to say thanks again for giving us the voiceover for that excellent intro. Continues to be great. And speaking of the intro, you're gonna have to say that for me. That's too many vowels. That's like getting into some weird Scandinavian stuff. Maybe Dane can pronounce your name today.
Brian Bombaporial Dillo.
You gotta say it with more rhythm. Brian Bombaporial Dillo. Brian Bombaporial Dillo. Yes, you have to be rhythmical because
is his jacket all the time. Is his jacket blue and his boots are yellow?
For yellow.
Yeah.
Thank you for the intro.
His headphones are red and his glass is mellow.
Oh, that's good. What are you drinking today, sir? I see that glass. Ooh, that's nice. I almost went for the same bottle. Yes. Cheers.
Cheers. Yeah, this opened me up last night talking Akira. So yeah, so everybody, yeah. So I was a little more loose with my dialogue yesterday than usual. So cheers.
Speaking of, you have another stream that you're doing right after this today, right?
Yeah. So I'm probably gonna have to duck depending on what time we conclude. I might have to duck out early.
I think we'll be under. I think we'll be fine. But let us know if you do need to get ready. All right. With that, let's introduce some people from the chat. We have Amanda Manethrin is hanging out there. Nerdtorial. We have the Thad that shouldn't be right. There's a lot of vowels missing from that. Matt's here. Vic Rattlehead, Jonathan R. Let's see. I saw Gadfly Fiction. And Lyle Hammock is here. I think he was actually saying hello to you there, Nerdtorial. I brought that up before. And then Lady Balefire calling us all hoes. That seems unnecessarily rude. Maybe accurate for some people. I'll just say we're not gonna argue against that too.
I'm a good person.
Out.
A lot of
Brian is a nice lady.
Brian's a nice lady.
Oh, come on.
Okay.
Hose is a term of endearment, guys.
Fair enough. All right. Fair enough. Okay. So are we ready to dive in? Introductions have been done. We're ready to dive in and talk about this great book.
We had to read this? Oh, crap.
All right. I'm going to kick Nerdtorial out. He didn't read the book, guys.
Dude, honestly,
I actually finished it a few hours ago. So yeah,
watching the movie ain't going to help you for this section.
Yeah,
no! I have lots to say about Aragorn, or excuse me, Strider. I have a lot to say about Strider.
Okay, all right. Maybe let's just get it out there in the start of this before we go kind of chapter by chapter and go through overall impressions, and maybe we can get rid of some of the movie talk at the start here. You're right. This is probably the deepest cuts that we've seen before. I think the first 6 chapters, right? What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, we get back at what? The back into chapter 10 is when we get back on movie track.
Yeah.
It's
I mean, there's a little bit of that in chapter 9 with the prancing pony. But I was surprised. I actually thought everything would happen in chapter 9. I was wrong. Chapter 10 is basically part 2 of chapter 9.
Yep.
Okay.
So the entire Bree segment was the 2 chapters, but there was so much that was left out of the movie, like so much dialogue. Strider he's a lot like Gandalf in a way. I mean, he's older. He's 86 years old, 86, 87 years old, and he acts it like he acts like another no nonsense father figure for our Hobbit heroes. Like he has a wit. He has a dark wit. He will insult. If you say something annoying, he will insult, and he's very, very kingly. I could see that, but he still has some of that affectionism that Viggo Mortensen's Aragorn had too, especially when he's like, there's always hope. I'm Aragorn, son of Aragorn. I was reading, I was like, yeah, just like watching the movie.
Dan, you got a big smile. What are you thinking?
I'm just happy to be chatting about this, but it's in one hand, I get that this was a section of the books that got abridged for time, but also kind of this would have felt as kind of a detour. It still kind of feels as a bit of a detour when you read it. So I agree with this being a section that they cut, but I mean, there's a lot of really fun stuff in here, especially a lot of the poetry. So that's what I really enjoyed going through it. Even like Tolkien wrote out a 2-page or whatever song about the dish runs away with the spoon.
How about that unforgettable? How about that unforgettable? And Lady Balefire brought this up. How about that unforgettable boner poem?
Yes.
Ring a ding pillow? What?
That unforgettable boner poem, while smoking faggot. Excuse me. This cigar, not anything else.
You got to keep those words until hour 2 of the stream, man. You can't. We're gonna get taken off YouTube now. The censors are still watching for at least
like
the
bundle of sticks.
20 minutes.
I'm beginning to think that Brian honestly hasn't put down his glass since last night, and he's just trying to avoid the hangover.
The cumulative hangover would kill him.
Fantastic reference.
So,
the big thing that sticks out to me about this chapter overall as a whole is, Jesus Christ, Tolkien loved him some poems and songs. Like, if you are coming into this not having read these and you have only seen the movies, you're like, wow, this guy really, really dug the rhythm and blues shit. And it's cool. Like, it's a very interesting way to do sort of history and world building. But wow, there's a lot of whimsy in these chapters. There's a lot of dark stuff too, but you gotta appreciate some of the whimsy.
I feel the poetry is very significant and very fitting, because I mean, if you really want to know where the term an epic comes from, this is something I learned, I think, in grade school or high school. Epic is basically a poem.
Yep.
I mean, your Iliad and Odyssey, which are the 2 most classic examples, they're poetry. They tell a story through poetry and rhyme, and like most things. I mean, like most poetry, it rhymes. Like a certain prequel trilogy, right? Right, Pips?
The difficulty with printing, and so before you had movable type printing press and linen paper and whatnot, books were incredibly expensive, and most stuff that was composed was essentially poetry or rhyming, and that was so it could be remembered. Because it's almost impossible to have an oral tradition in prose, because people are going to fuck things up and inject their own stuff into it constantly. If you limit yourself to a meter and rhyming couplets and whatnot, that's honestly why a lot of the epic poems and sagas existed the way they did, and why it's kind of fallen out of favor with the rise of the printing press. But what I've always found interesting is, I think it's easier to write prose and it's more difficult to write poetry. But on the flip side of it, it's easier to remember poetry and it's more difficult to remember large swaths of prose. So
I think it's easier. I think it's very easy to write bad poetry.
Yes.
So a couple of the comments here about the different characters engaging in poetry. Yeah, I mean, so the stuff we said before about the cow jumping over the moon. I love that Tolkien came up with like a full sort of song and story written by Bilbo that like links with the sort of children's rhyme, because that just matches kind of his idea for writing the series. Sam, I agree with Lady B on this one. Sam's verses that he drops here about which
Gil-galad.
Thank you. Yeah, it was Gil-galad that he was talking about. Just awesome stuff. I liked Strider's kind of little history lessons, the stuff from Tom Bombadil, like the world building through especially the poems and songs and stuff like that was awesome. And I think Alex is right on with, we continue to see the tonal shifts between sort of the kind of whimsical and then like the leaning towards dark kind of horror, right? So we had the House of Tom Bombadil, then we had the Barrow-wights, then we had sort of like silliness in the inn with the cat, or the cat and the dog and the cow jumping over the moon and all this stuff, and then straight to a new conspiracy, not the conspiracy unmasked, but a new conspiracy, a more sinister conspiracy, and then the Dark Riders, Weathertop. I mean, it's just it continues to just accelerate and still do those shifts back and forth, which I thought was really good. Like
the tonal shift. I'll there's one thing you didn't bring up that I thought was freaking awesome, and I thought, you know what, I could have seen this in the movie had they included the character of Fatty Bulger. The beginning of chapter 11, A Knife in the Dark, where they're sleeping, and we hearken all the way back to Buckland, all the way back to Crick Hollow Point, was it Crick Hollow Point, Crick Hollow Watch, whatever.
Crick Hollow. I think that was
Crick
just
Hollow.
the name.
Yeah.
And the riders
was right.
The riders come.
Was the more dangerous job.
The riders come, and they're the Fatty. Like Fatty knew right away there was something wrong. He sees them. They're stalking his house. Just like something out of Michael Myers' Halloween, very creepy. And they're like, open in the name, and then they talk. They say, open in the name of Mordor, and something like that. I was listening to the audio book. I forget the unabridged one. Who was it? Nigel. Who's the guy that did it? Nigel something.
Rob Inglis.
Rob Inglis.
Rob
sorry.
Inglis is
Why'd I assume Nigel?
one.
British. I don't know. Sorry.
Half of Britain is named Nigel.
Yeah. That's actually fair. I think we can all forgive you for just thinking British dude Nigel. Yeah.
Yeah, I have to curb my bigotry there. Sorry. But that opening and him running for a mile to get to the next house and then they sound the alarm, and then the wraiths are like, Sauron will deal with them in the future. I was just like, dude, this is crazy. Actually, this is like something that I could see them putting in the movie, but it was a great opening for an episode of a show, like great cold open. That's what it was to me. It was a cold open, and it was just awesome. I was listening to it. Oh my gosh, sorry. I'm swooning. Well,
I was going to say that I'm glad
in the movie they cut out the Dark's retribution against the Shire, because that happens in the books. It doesn't happen in the movie. I also think it's very interesting that when Sam is singing the song of Gil-galad, Strider cuts him off and is like, hey, maybe we don't do that one. And what's interesting about that one is the next segment in that is the story of Gil-galad and Elendil fighting and dying to Sauron, which is Aragorn's great grandfather, who he and Gil-galad were, right next to each other. It was a 2v1 fight of the two of them versus Sauron. So it's like, hey, maybe we don't bring that one up.
I think this was Tolkien's way of saying too much story too soon. We're gonna save this for a little bit later. That's
you never know when poetry is getting written, because it's pretty fucking hard, and maybe just ran out of words to rhyme and just like, that's enough.
So apparently,
All right,
like
we know how Dane writes his stories, guys. If he ever starts writing poetry in one of his stories and he just stops, it's like he had a glass of brandy or cognac, and he was like, "I think that's enough."
It's exactly like how Xanadu was written. I'm coming off of who was that? I
the
forget.
Rush song, Xanadu.
No,
that song.
No. It's
Da,
the
da, da,
romantic
da,
poem.
da, 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 da. Oh, sorry.
No, it was the poem written on opium. Kublai Khan. Xanadu.
See you, Lady B. Have fun.
All right. Anyways, Pips,
if I can just jump back
do
to,
we want to? Yeah, do we want to go through this section more chronologically, or do we just?
Yeah, we're going to.
Okay.
Yep. I just wanted to say one thing. I'm glad that Nerdporio brought up that he liked that scene. The thumbnail that I pick, I sort of bastardized the line a little bit because it wasn't in the scene of them crossing the ford. He did say, halts, right? But the "open in the name of Mordor" is the line that I sort of stole a little bit and put into the thumbnail because I love that line too. I thought that it was so good.
It took me by surprise when I heard it. I was like, "Oh, I forget the ring race actually do talk. They like it's. I'm trying to unlearn what the movie has been doing to me for the last 2 decades because this is my first time rereading Lord of the Rings in like over 2 decades. Like my dad bought this book for me. I think this was in Ohio when we were on vacation or something. I was doing a Bible Bowl tournament at the same time, so I was reading this while doing that. So it was so I was learning I was reciting the Book of John while reading this. And my coach at the church I was going to was cheering me on reading this, and that's what kept me reading Lord of the Rings first. So then I knew the movies were coming out. I had no idea what they were going to be, but when I saw them, holy shit, I had no idea they were going to be that good.
So my comment about the poems is it drives me a little crazy whenever I hear people reviewing these books and saying that on rereads and even initial reads, they just kind of skim the poems and skip them. And I'm just kind of like, what are you doing? They say that the book is better when you don't read the poems. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard reviews on these books.
You would lose all of the charm, right? Like I think Alex, I think all of us were talking last week about how charming this story is. And if you took all the poems out, especially the more sort of like silly kind of the one about the cow jumping over the moon, if you take those poems out, if you take the poems of Bombadil and Goldberry out, you lose so much of Tolkien, right? Like he started this world by writing sort of just little short character snippets and poems and making this language and maps and stuff like that. And finally integrated a lot of those things into this story. Well,
Lyle has a comment out in the chat about how the Legendarium for Tolkien was created through song. And so you kind of lose a whole basis for a lot of things when you do that. You lose a lot of character, but you also lose the intentional tension breaks that he puts in there with the song to pull you out a little bit from the tension, even though the song may be kind of dreary or end on a rather morose note. It still pulls you away a little bit from everything and kind of separates you into the history that he's building with all of this. And you lose just an immense amount of stuff if you just skip over that because you don't like to read poetry. It's silly.
Whoever says that is you shouldn't be listening to them because they're beneath Tolkien and hence they're beneath us. And B, I mean, how do you think things were passed down for the longest time? Through song, through poems. I mean, seriously, like you said, the world building and everything that gives, like as Tom Shippey says, gives Lord of the Rings depth is from that poetry. I mean, there's prose, there's stuff that explains it, but the poetry is the heart of Lord of the Rings. Now, when I was a kid, I was annoyed by the poems at first too, but I was 16. I was a dumb teenager. What can I say? Now I'm older. Yeah. Now I'm older, and I appreciate it.
And Rob Inglis's performance on this audiobook, if you haven't heard it, I haven't heard Andy Serkis's performance on it. I will with The Hobbit. I haven't either. But Rob Inglis, to me, it's almost like he actually wrote out the songs in musical form before he actually did the audio.
They're really good.
Just really awesome stuff.
Yeah, I actually put up a short, the song of Tom Bombadil and Goldberry from actually the end of chapter 6, but I thought it was a good lead in. And with that, let's start with chapter 7 here. So in the house of Tom Bombadil, and actually it starts with some poetry, right? So they come into the house, they see Goldberry for the first time, and we get Frodo saying, "Fair Lady Goldberry," and he says, "Oh, slender as a willow wand, oh, clearer than clear water. O reed by the living pond, fair river daughter. O springtime and summertime and spring again after. O wind on the waterfall and the leaves' laughter." And then he's like shocked, like where did that come from? This sort of weird thing. He gets named as an elf friend, which I love that that's a thing that other people just can kind of know. Like, oh, you're a smart dude. You must be friends with the elves. Like. But then chapter 7 goes all the way up until let's see, it ends again, and this is I think the reason that it's great that we talked about the poetry, because it ends with poetry as well, with Tom Bombadil teaching them the song to sort of call him back. So they spend time with Tom. They do a whole bunch of stuff that we'll talk about, but it ends with them all learning the song of Ho, Tom Bombadil, Tom Bombadillo, by water, wood, and hill, by reed and willow, by fire, sun, and moon, hearken now and hear us. Come, Tom Bombadil, for our need is near us. And again, the audiobook does a great job with this. I've been reading the book and listening to the audiobook because the songs they're just so good. So what do you guys have for In the House of Tom Bombadil?
You know what? To me, this them being in the house reminded me of kids coming home from, going out playing or, being lost, coming home and being invited back home. Parents are there. They're saying, we're here to protect you. We're here to protect you from what's out there. It felt very parental, or like, Tom Bombadil was very paternal and Goldberry felt very maternal. That's kind of what I got from this. And then they were listening to stories. It was like they were Goldberry and Tom Bombadil were like their parents, just welcoming them home for a couple of days. That's how I saw it.
To get them to go to sleep. The thing about fear no nightly noises, right? Like I was like, man, life goals is memorizing this little thing, and when I have kids, tucking them into bed every night and giving them this sort of thing from Tom Bombadil and Goldberry, and not explaining what that's from, just like telling it to them. And then when they're like 10 or 11 and they read this book, they'll just be like, oh my gosh, life goals. Everybody else should sign up for this life goal as well.
This was very, like you guys said last week, and I totally agree. This was another very wholesome chapter. Like this is like the tone is just so light here. It's so delightful. There's nothing unlikable about Tom or Goldberry. Like they're there. It's a very positive experience. They tell stories. We actually learn a bit of lore. We learn a bit about lore of the Barrow Downs, the kingdoms that were there. And the old forest, the old man Willow. Like, why is he as nasty as he is? Well, it's because he's old and he's paranoid and
he's crotchety. He's old and crotchety,
and doesn't like people that move and have freedom.
Get off my lawn.
Tone it down, guys. I know you're talking about me again. Now, I've got a quick question for you guys. Sorry. Go ahead, Alex.
I think it's funny how basically Tom Bombadil is sort of the dude. He's probably the most powerful person in Middle Earth at any given time, and you can kind of see the way that they let you know that, because he's as Nerdporial is doing, he has the ring, he has the most powerful artifact in creation, and to him it's a toy, it's a joke. He's not all that impressed with it. So it's sort of interesting how that's worked in.
So I got a question, and if we're just thinking narratively or kind of overarching, why is this in the story? Because I get the sense, as you were saying, he's a parental figure. It's a place of safety. But if you're trying to build up the ring and Sauron as this evil, if you simultaneously are in the same part of your story, introduce someone who just flicks it away as a trinket, are you undermining it?
I think that is.
I'm kind of wrestling with it.
What's happening? However, I think it's interesting from a world building perspective in the idea that sort of all great sci-fi and fantasy have a bigger society and civilization that came before it, and you know, we're just living in the remains. And Tom Bombadil is an example of sort of one of the olds that lived for so long that he's you know, he remembers what it was like when Melkor was around, so he's not particularly bothered by somebody like Sauron. I also think and dude, you got to fix that name, man, because that should be in the comments has it perfectly. It sort of highlights the idea that if you want for nothing, and if you can't be tempted because you have anything, the ring can't really tempt you. And so it's sort of that's the reason that the hobbits are so good at carrying the ring when the other races basically instantly fall to madness and destruction.
There's an alliteration with Tom Bombadil to God himself. In Exodus, when God calls Moses out of the wilderness, he asks, well, who shall I say to Israel? Who shall I say sent me? And he says, say that I am sent you. And so when Frodo asks Goldberry, who is Tom Bombadil, her response is, he is. And then she goes on and says, he is as you have seen him. But there is this.
There's one other spot as well.
Yeah, it says it later in the chapter as well. That's directly from Tom, if I'm not mistaken.
I think he says, I am Tom Bombadil. I am Tom.
What also might be, I am Tom Bombadil.
It's such a great thing. I really liked the connection you're making with the biblical one. I think that's intentional, especially with Tolkien and Catholicism was a big part of his life and his influences. But sorry to cut you off. I wanted a way to interject this because I just love this line so much. Frodo, they've been listening to his stories, and he says, "Who are you, Master?" And he says, "What? Don't you know my name yet? That's the only answer. Tell me, who are you alone, yourself and nameless? But you are young and I am old. Eldest, that's what I am. Mark my words, my friends. Tom was here before the river and the trees. Tom remembers the first raindrop and the first acorn. He made paths before the big people and saw the little people arriving. He was there before the king and their graves and the Barrow Wights. When the elves passed westward, Tom was here already. Before the seas were bent, he knew the dark under the stars when it was fearless. Before the Dark Lord came from outside."
Yeah.
And so good.
So I mean, it's there's always kind of like debate in some circles about who is Tom Bombadil, like asking the very same question. And I almost kind of can consider Tom Bombadil as kind of like a Christophany. So Christ in the Old Testament appearing on earth before he was actually incarnate. And it's almost like that because he's completely impervious to what the world's going to try and throw at him. And that ring is going to be what the world tries to throw at him. Can't be beaten. He's not going to look at this as anything because he's commander of it all.
I think Lyle Hammock has a good answer for Dane's question, though. So Tolkien himself had basically said, and I think Tom Bombadil, the character, as well as Goldberry, came from some of his poems and other writings before. And so he kind of worked it into the story. I have the impression that it lines up a lot with the intro that Brian put together for us with his view of nature and sort of the struggle between industrialization and man and the things that we make and the natural state of the world. And I think that's why he's in the story. But I think also he was clear in some of his letters that Tom is not important to the story of the Ring and the Lord of the Rings. He's important to the story of Middle Earth. And so I agree with the decision to cut him from the theatrical movie because of that. I mean, I think that Tolkien himself basically said, if you had to abridge this book, you'd cut Bombadil out.
I think personally that, obviously Bombadil was based off of a doll that he bought that his son had. I forget what the doll was called, but this was, I think, his way of, like you said, kind of self-inserting his love of nature and his distaste for, machines industrialization, machine men with machine hearts and machine minds, to quote Charlie Chaplin. Sorry.
Yeah.
Now the one thing is, I would love to see an adaptation. I don't know if it'll probably never happen with the way shit's going down now. I would love to see Tom Bombadil. I'd like to see who would play Tom Bombadil, and how it would be incorporated into an adaptation. It's not in the radio. The 78
Didn't we settle it was going to
drama.
be Jack Black?
It's not in the Bakshi movie, and of course we know it's not in Peter Jackson's movie. So, does it have to? Do we have to focus on the ring? I mean, yes, the ring's important, but can't we just have like an episode? An episode
I
where
don't want
everybody's
adaptations
happy
anymore. I don't. I'm not going to ask for an adaptation for at least like 20 years.
Even if it's done by Terry Matalas. Oh, excuse me. Sorry.
Not until the White Cloaks have purchased the rights for the Wheel of Time.
Yeah.
Brian Blessed would be perfect if he was younger.
All right, let's get back on topic here. So in the House of Tom Bombadil, they have some dreams, right? They have a few dreams. I think Sam is the only one who doesn't have a dream, and he's just like, yeah, I'm totally good.
Yeah, I think Mary drowns or something, or was it Pippin?
Yeah, there's some crazy dreams. Tom Bombadil, we talked about him holding the ring. He could see Frodo when Frodo put the ring on, which is another indication of not just the fact that he held it and it this is whatever, and he does a little magic trick with it.
And that was a bit of a reprimand. That was like a reprimand right there. That's another reason why it reinforced my parental, this whole parental vibe that I got. Was he's like, get back over here, sit down, and I'm gonna listen to some more of my stories. And because he tried to sneak out. He attempted to put on the ring, and it was just like, no, get back over here, sit down. And he's like, okay, sure.
But ultimately, they learn a bunch of stories. They eat a bunch of food. I love how Tolkien always describes the hobbits and food, and he always they set about the important things, and he has a lot of little phrases like that, and then they set to work eating.
I got a question. Speaking of the food, now, what is the yellow cream? I'm wondering what is because they say butter. I thought it was butter, but it's not. What was the yellow cream?
Creme fraiche.
I thought it literally was buttered cream.
He was a South Park fan before it was his time. Old Randy Marsh and his creme fraiche. Sorry, I knew Dane would laugh at that. Yeah, I got no idea. I got no idea.
Saying it's poutine.
Stop being Canadian.
All right. Are we good to move on to Fog on the Barrow Downs? Another chapter that I think got wholly dismissed, right? Nothing, no Barrow Whites.
Nope.
Man, what an awesome chapter though as well. So they leave the house of Tom Bombadil. Basically it starts out that they have breakfast with Tom, right? So they have breakfast, they do stuff, and then they set out on the actual journey. And it doesn't go as planned, mainly because those hobbits and their damn eating.
And I think they fall asleep, and then there's a fog that just completely engulfs them. Then they get lost, and then they get separated. Frodo's alone because this is from his point of view, and it goes into creepy. It goes into creepy. Goes into creepy 80s, horror territory.
Crawling skeleton hand. Yeah. There's, some dark incantations. I think somebody else said earlier, some dark incantations from the Barrow Whites were stuff that they loved. What do you guys have for this, other than the fact that we get to meet another fatty, but this time it's a horse?
I thought it was a mule. Guess not.
I think it's a pony. I think it's a
okay.
horse.
Maybe it's a pony. I might be. Yeah. I'll probably. I'm wrong.
Yeah, at one point, they say the 5 ponies. So
yeah.
I'll take the L.
No, good. It's just a very. Shit's kind of scary. Like when he's talking about how there's a fucking hand walking like a spider. Like that's weird.
It honestly it made me think of some like your classic like D&D campaigns and stuff like that. Like this is he's describing this thing that is so immersed in kind of the culture. And again, it's just an example of like him creating some backstory and some lore behind something that like already exists in kind of pop culture, fantasy culture, things like that. And I really liked it. I enjoyed reading it.
Hey, can I read the incantation? Can I read the incantation right here? All right, thanks. Cold be hand and heart and bone, and cold be sleep under stone. Never more to wake on stony bed. Never till the sun fails and the moon is dead. In the black wind the stars shall die, and still on gold here let them lie. Till the Dark Lord lifts his hand over Dead Sea and withered land. I wonder what Dark Lord they're talking about. Morgoth, Sauron, something else, something lower.
So I had a question about this, right? Because the Barrow Whites is a the Beowulf reference. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
This is a red Beowulf.
I know that we got some serious Tolkien scholars here in the chat. So if anybody's got some really good stuff to throw out about the history of kind of the people that we're talking about, the Barrow Whites, I know that Tom Bombadil talks about them a little bit, right? And there's some interesting stuff kind of about who they were, and obviously the daggers that the hobbits get have some special power, it seems, right?
No ruby on the hilt. Sorry, wrong series.
No ruby daggers, but they do have some red Damascus in the blades. It sounds like he was describing.
I believe.
So yeah, I mean,
sorry, I was going into spoiler territory, so my bad.
Yeah, trying to keep it down. This is just chapter 8, guys. We're just talking about chapter 8.
I take very Skyrim, but I mean, this is. I think you guys hit the nail on the head. It's very Beowulf. It's very Norse, right? The whole idea of a white or a burial mounds, or the soldiers from a long ago battle who
did they take an arrow to the knee too, like Skyrim?
Yep. What a lot of people don't know is that Tolkien kind of made his name as a scholar and as a professor for his translation of Beowulf. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if it was his PhD or if it was just an academic work that kind of put him on the map, but dude really spent a lot of time on Beowulf.
I think he's a professor of medieval literature, so he knew all about Beowulf and writing and everything. Yeah. Old English, everything.
I want to say it was sort of his doctoral thesis. I don't think that's the exact word that they used sort of at the time and in England, but that was sort of his big claim to fame. If J.R.R. Tolkien in 1947 walked into a literary scholar, they'd be like, "Oh, that's the Beowulf guy," and then obviously he became that's the greatest author of the modern era.
It's too bad the editors didn't treat him that way, because he wanted to publish Lord of the Rings as a single tome, and they're like, no, you don't know, you can't talk, you can't talk to us like that. We're splitting into 3. You know why? Because you're not as popular or something. Okay, I might be making that up, but he tried to get them to publish as a single tome because it was a single book. It was according to him, it was a single book, but they split into 3 parts.
Yeah.
Yep.
Or 6 parts, depending on how you see it.
Right, which is kind of ridiculous considering if you took all 3 of those books together plus The Hobbit, it's only half as long as the prologue from Knife of Dreams. So
I haven't gone that far yet. Can't wait.
It's a great prologue, though. Stop. You know what? No. We're gonna keep it. We're gonna keep it Lord of the Rings, guys. If you guys will allow me, I want to say the best poetry in the whole book so far is "Hey now, come hey now, whither do you wander? Up, down, near and far, here, there, or yonder. Sharp ears, wise nose, swish tail, and bumpkin. White socks, my little lad, old fatty lumpkin." A poem about horses and how wise and smart and just it's just this is the quality. This is the quality writing. I don't know why it just speaks to me. It just speaks to me. I can't think of why, but it's just nice. It's just wholesome.
I loved how like a big segment of the chapter with, you know, where they're dealing with debris and everything, which was complete horror in the films. But there was like several
We're
pages
getting
where
there.
they were
We're getting
talking
there.
about what? I'm just
We're
trying to
not
move
to Bree
along.
yet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Sorry.
they have to get away
just-
from the
yeah, just-
zombies first.
Yeah, are we ready to move on? We're ready to move on.
Well,
No one has anything else
If
to
we're
say.
done,
else?
if we're done
I'll
with
just sit back and drink.
if we're done with Beowulf, we're done with Anglo-Saxon, or sorry, not Norman. The Danes invaded England before the Normans did, but that was Tolkien's whole thing, right? So if he was a expert on Beowulf, his real lament was that the Danes invading England in the 700s, 800s, kind of put to bed any potential for an Anglo-Saxon mythology.
Yeah.
And that's where he thought he was going to come in. So
Yeah. Well, and this
So
whole
rude,
scene
Daniel.
actually, now that you mentioned that this all this stuff has a lot of Norse influence with it, it calls me back to last year when I went and saw The Northman in the theater, and you have that one scene underground where he's getting that sword, and
Yeah.
now I mean an inspiration for a Barrowite, that can be some real creepy addition to the visualization of this.
But it has to do with also Norse burial practices. Was very much about either you could do a ship burial where you like built a mound over top the ship, but you loaded it up with treasure. Like they found so much silver and Danegeld and whatnot. Basically, people buried with their gold, but it was all about, you know, if you were going to go into the mounds, you were going to try and steal a treasure or find an ancient sword or something like that. Well, watch out, because there would be zombie warriors there, like these barrow whites.
Yeah, and I just remember reading this section and just being like, all of a sudden, you know, you have all this tension from the chase and everything, but all of a sudden there's just this creepiness coming over. I mean, it's like he heard behind his head a creaking and scraping sound, and all of a sudden you get all this description of what's going on. He's looking over and he's seeing his friends with a sword laid across him. You're just kind of like, what in the bloody hell did I just walk into in this book?
So were they trying to be buried? Were they trying to bury them alive? Is that what was going on?
I think the sword across their neck was going to get drawn across their neck, and they were going to get human sacrifice for this rite.
Yeah, the gold chains and the gold crowns around them were aspects of the ritual.
Yeah,
and I think that's another callback to a lot of the Norse practices with their rituals. Everything in the afterlife had to deal with blood and the spilling of it, so that it was kind of an honorific thing for them.
Yes, I looked it up, and it is inspired by the God help me Hrumanadar Saga Gripsanar. I will put it in the chat.
The only Norse sagas that I've ever read were the Njal saga, Njal, I think. I picked up a copy of that when I was in Iceland a couple decades ago. Those are good stories. Icelandic Nordic sagas are really good reads if anyone is curious for some old fun reads.
They write like they do music. Very metal.
Yeah. I'll buy that. Okay, so let's move on to another great chapter, because it's written. It's got ponies and horses in the name. I mean, come on. At the Sign of the Prancing Pony, chapter 9. You know, that's what I think I appreciate the most. Tolkien really understood the value of horses. You know, he really understood that they're just a special creature.
Do you feel validated now? Do you feel validated?
I feel very validated.
There you go.
Well, very validated.
Well, millennial.
He could not have enjoyed this book if the horses weren't in this book. You just wouldn't be able to relate.
That's true. Without the representation of horses, I don't know what I would even be able to read here. Like, it would just be so foreign to me. I couldn't appreciate any of the hobbits because they're not horses. You know, I mean, it's terrible. It's terrible. So they get to the Bree land, specifically Bree, a town that is populated by a mix of men and hobbits, right? And they wind up at the Prancing Pony, which was recommended to them by Tom Bombadil.
Not Gandalf, like the movie. Not like the movie.
Yep. And they have some adventures here. Okay. big change from the show. It was not Merry and Pippin dancing on the table, giving up the name of Baggins and doing all this stuff. Frodo himself is responsible for the scene in the sort of common room of the dancing prancing pony.
But what led him to do that?
There was a point where Strider says you better do something about what they're saying.
Agreed. I totally agree. I'm highlighting it because I think that the Merry and Pippin comic relief in the movies, it's not so like it's a well-established thing of taking a character from a book and kind of turning them into the comic relief in a movie adaptation because movie producers or writers, whatever, like think that you need to have that light character. I get that. There's nothing necessarily wrong with doing that with Merry and Pippin. But I do think that it's interesting that the character of Frodo gets kind of wounded in the process here is what I noted in the adaptation of this section of the book, in that Frodo misses out on sort of being the sort of author of his own, destiny in the Prancing Pony, right? Like it was him that ultimately went too far and created the scene and caused the stir and the ring getting put on his finger and disappearing and all this other stuff. It was really his own stuff that did it. And then also he loses agency when we get to the flight to the Ford in the way that they adapted it in the movie. So there's just a couple things, and this is one of them, where Frodo's role in an event was downplayed. No,
I can. Well,
is it that different? I mean, really, the functional difference is, instead of saying, "Of course we know Baggins, he's right there," they say, "This guy named Baggins that we know from our hometown that was awesome did this cool trick where he put a ring on and disappeared." Like, functionally, I'm not sure.
So then, and they're all drinking. So who's gonna fucking believe them? Like, seriously.
Yeah. So I guess in my mind it was pointless. The change was pointless, and it hurt the character of Frodo as being flawed and human and things like that as well. They could have been describing the story, and Frodo could have come up and changed the story, and they could have had the song about the green dragon and all that stuff instead of the cow jumping over the moon. I like the cow jumping over the moon story, like the poem in the books. Like, I like it. I understand why it wouldn't fit the tone that the movie was doing, and it was too long, right? I understand that. So you could have shortened it a little bit, but still had it be that Frodo came in and started the singing as a distraction from the story that they were telling. And now he's a part of the problems that they run into instead of it being Merry and Pippin's fault. You know what I mean?
No, well, one thing I'll say, I think we've noted plenty of times as going through this that the book kind of oscillates from whimsy to horror and back.
Yeah.
So there's good tonal changes. I don't think the films do that.
They don't.
No,
any close to a degree.
It's constant, constant stakes, constant dread. Like you get you have the constant feeling that they're being hunted and that things are not going to go the way they should.
As light as it gets in a Prancing Pony scene is, this is a pint. It comes in pints. I'm getting one. Like, I thought that was a good ad. It comes in pints. Yeah. I'm getting one.
Yeah, they do the big relief when you get into Rivendell. You get the big settings where that give you the big relief, but you get the little liners here and there. That I guess.
But you're not going to get story. You're not going to get Frodo getting up on a table and singing a song. Instead, what you get in the film is Frodo caressing the ring. And the dark looks from all the strangers in the bar kind of, and you as the audience member, you're wondering, is the ring working on these people? Exactly like that, Brian. Well done.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah. Well, sorry, I didn't mean to creep everyone out. You might lose viewers because of that now. Sorry.
All right, Daniel is calling me out on not checking my hooved privilege. So I
didn't realize it, but the dish in the poem, the dish does run away with the spoon. I am impressed.
Yeah,
I am impressed. It does. I forgot about that.
It does. It's the charming nature of the story. Nate, you were 100% right. If you skipped this whole thing, like, yeah, you'd get the plot of this scene, but like
you'd lose something.
It's just such a charming little story. It's so nice to like look and see how Tolkien like brings and crafts in children's rhymes and things like that from the real world and ties them into his story, because that's the whole point of his story. Is it's supposed to be the origin myth of of the culture, right?
Yes. Well, and you keep their character consistent from the start too. It's like, so no matter what their issues are, they're still remembering the song. They're still remembering the histories. They're still remembering a way to enjoy themselves because of all this other stuff that's going on.
It's a way to escape, and it's a very noble thing, as Mr. Christopher said.
Yeah. All right. So
it gives it depth. Like I said, it gives the story a lot more depth. Like it's not just a single story, with constant feelings of dread and everything. There's a lot more to it. There's a lot more. There's a lot more to this, and that's so. If you get rid of this stuff, you lose something. It makes it less real, in my opinion.
Okay, so Frodo causes the scene, inadvertently puts the ring on, he disappears, he crawls under the table and goes sits by Strider as everyone is, like, there's magical stuff afoot, and gets all grumpy and whatever, right? And he's now scheduled himself for a private talk with both Strider and Mr. Butterbur, the proprietor of the Prancing Pony, right? And that takes us to chapter 10, named
Mr. Butterbur.
Strider. I know, I like Butterbur.
That's such a Harry. I don't know why, but that sounds like such a Harry Potter name too.
Because Butterbeer,
Mr. Butterbur, Mr. Butterbeer.
I think that's what you're thinking of. I don't know this for a fact. I kind of like the idea that Rowling probably stole the name Butterbeer from Butterbur.
You know what? I'm with you on that. I agree.
Hey, we're starting that rumor here.
It's not stealing.
You heard it here first.
It's not stealing. It's an homage.
Straight out of the horse's mouth.
Exactly.
It's not stealing if you steal from Lord of the Rings. Otherwise, we might have to ask a couple of questions about Aragog and Shelob.
True. All right. So chapter 10, Strider. Okay, so the hobbits, only 3 of the hobbits, mind you, Frodo, Pippin, and Sam. Okay, so Mary was gone, and I'll be honest with you, reading the previous chapter, I didn't necessarily notice that Mary was gone.
Yeah, neither did I.
And then chapter 10 starts. It was like, yep, Frodo, Pip, and Sam, they go back to the parlor. Their room has a parlor because just quaint sort of British countryside stories. Your rooms come with parlors, obviously. And then Mary was not there. The fire had burned low, and you're like, where's Mary? But it gets explained, and we have the scene with Strider, which this kind of in the movie, right? But let's talk about this. So Strider had been introduced a little bit with him talking to Frodo, and now we really get introduced to the character Strider. So what are the thoughts?
I mean, he's still kind of watching him, but he actually beckons Frodo, "Hey, let's talk," And they talk for a little bit. He's like, "I'm Strider. I'd like to, I have something to offer you if you're willing to hear it, and this will benefit you greatly." So he's trying to sell. He's like a salesman. He's trying to sell them on something. We don't know what it is yet. That's where this chapter really shines.
Yes.
But he says, you got to be careful around these parts, and your friends there are talking a little too much. You got to do something about it. And that's, and then they go in the parlor, and this is where, like I said earlier, Strider comes in. He is very, very. He has got such a deep, dark wit. Like he is well spoken. Unlike his, I like Viggo Mortensen's Aragorn, but his Aragorn's totally different. He's more.
Yeah.
Viggo Mortensen's is way more stoic. Doesn't say nearly as much, and he's a lot more. He's less. He's less of an ass. He's less of an ass and less of a no nonsense father figure. That's right. So I mean, like
Alex is right.
They they wanted that to be primarily Gandalf in the movies, and I'm okay. I guess I'm okay with that. I still like Viggo Mortensen's Aragorn, but he's not Strider. This is Strider. So there's Aragorn, there's Viggo Mortensen, Aragorn, and then there's Strider. This is fucking Strider.
Aragorn in the films is more of the action hero, right? So the very first shot, it's not really introduced whether or not he's a good guy or a bad guy. If anything, he looks like the most sinister person in the Prancing Pony. His eyes light up because he's smoking his pipe. He doesn't talk to Frodo before that incident happens with his disappearance, as in the books. Mm-hmm. He pulls him out of the situation and he takes him into a side room and starts berating him. And it all fits really kind of well, at least in the film, because it allows Sam to show his bravery and the other hobbits. And then ultimately that line where the audience comes over to kind of believe who this Strider fellow is, I think a servant of the enemy would look fairer and feel fouler. That's actually
such a great line. Yeah, such a great line. Gosh.
So I think let's give the film a lot of credit where it deserves it. It lifted the right parts from what was available.
Oh, it totally did.
And put it into a good sequence. But Brian is 100% right too. The Aragorn of the films is to fulfill the role of the action hero. He's got to be the captain to Boromir. He's got to have, he has to basically become the main character by the end of the films.
He's the reluctant heir, he doesn't want the responsibility of being, the heir of Isildur or the heir of Elendil. Here,
I think Matt's comment is 100% correct here. That the difference between the two characters is that movie Aragorn is still on his journey, rather than the book Aragorn, who has accepted his role and embraced it. I think that's a great point by Matt, and it describes a lot of kind of the difference there, because the stoic Aragorn that we see in the first couple movies is he's kind of standing back a little bit. He hasn't really decided that this is a fight that I want to take up, and is willing to kind of be in the back seat and let somebody else kind of drive a little bit. Whereas book Aragorn, at least that we've seen so far here, is very confident in who and what he is.
Where's the sword? Where's the sword that was broken?
Exactly, Dane. 100%. That's a great thing to bring up.
The sword that was broken in the films is on display at Rivendell, and there's actually a scene in the third movie where it gets brought to him, and it's like, all right, time to embrace your destiny.
He's got it. Yeah,
it's on the set.
He's got it the whole time. Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah, book Aragorn is he's Simba in The Lion King. He just can't wait to be king.
Just can't wait to be king.
Oh my.
Whereas I will say, I think it's the best scene in the entire trilogy is the scene where Boromir dies and Aragorn gives him the speech. Like I tear up every time I watch that scene. But awesome. that is sort of the moment where it flips, where Aragorn is, hey, I'm a dude, I'm on this adventure, versus, okay, I'm the captain of this team now. Everybody get on my back. We're taking this to the bonus.
That's good, because it does shift in the Two Towers. Because he was not the leader of the party at all in the Fellowship of the Ring.
No, but
the movie.
He was still no nonsense, I think, throughout the entirety of the three movies. That's one consistency of the character between the books and the movies. It was still that whole they wanted to give him an arc, because more in the books it's more like he's got a straight line and he's just doing it. He's the unattainable kind of hero archetype thing that you have in some stories. I would have preferred to have seen that, but they've got it for whatever reason in movies, they want to sit there and give everybody an arc. And, that was the most egregious change for me, but I can still get over it and call it the greatest trilogy of movies I've ever seen because it's such a well-played adaptation. And they still keep his character consistent from the books into the movie.
Yep.
So Matt brings up the point about the sword as well. I will say that, reading the story again here, and I think Brian brought this up, for me, this has been a couple decades since I read this story the last time. So I've read Lord of the Rings, I've read The Hobbit, I've read The Silmarillion, but it's been a long time. I've mostly watched the movies. I've watched the movies I don't know, several times since that time, and that's really affected my memory of the book. So it's almost like a first time reading it over again for me.
Same here.
But I can still say that like the way the movie did it works. And to the criticism that fans sometimes get into the one-to-one adaptation thing, right? I think that it's important for us to say like, yeah, on some levels I would have liked it maybe if they had done it the way that it was in the books. I think that's the right story. It's Tolkien's story, but at least we can give Peter Jackson credit that the story they told at least worked and was good and had emotional payoffs and all those other things. So like, I think this is exactly right. So you can respect and enjoy the movies, but there are things that like, well, that's not the way that I would have done it. And I think you're right. I think this specific thing, I think you're right on a way that it could have been done differently.
Okay. Allow me to play devil's advocate here.
All right.
If we accept that Aragorn is 87 years old here, why some point in the last 67 years has he not rolled into Gondor, taken the crown, and said, "I'm the dude now"? So that is and I get that there are legitimate, reasons for it, but I will always say that is a change that I do not take issue with. So
as the old blood of Numenor, I mean, he's going to live to be like 250 years old, right?
Yeah.
So he's basically a dude in his like late 20s, early 30s.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that's like, yeah, man, like I graduated high school. I went on sort of the Ranger Rumspringa. I had some good times at the Prancing Pony with all the local lasses. And now I'm ready to go sort of, inherit my kingdom. Like, it all makes sense.
I get it. I do. But anywho, that will always be my defense of it.
Hey, worthy goals.
Point.
Worthy goals. Life goals. There you go.
All right. So Strider tries to get them to accept him as a companion. We learned that he's been stalking them since they got onto the road out of the hedge of Tom Bombadil's place, which I like. It's kind of a good little thing. And then they get the letter from Gandalf because Butterbeer shows up and he brings the letter from Gandalf. Sorry, I forgot to put it in the mail. I was really busy. I was mostly drunk. I don't know, whatever other stuff he says.
He couldn't get anyone to take it. That was the thing. He couldn't get anyone.
A little bit of a self-insert. The mostly drunk part. I apologize, Butterbur. You're probably better than that.
He promised to take it like the next day, and he couldn't find anybody to do it, and then he just fucking forgot. Like he just nobody wanted to travel all the way to the Shire. It's like I forget how far.
You'd have to go.
Shire, but it's like a good 500.
It's not that far, but it's far.
You'd have to go through those barrow downs and through the old
you
forest.
Take the road,
or you go around and take longer and everything.
Okay, so there's a couple things we learned from the letter. First of all, so correct me if I'm wrong here from the previous chapters, they left on like the 1st of September, right? That's when they left the Shire. Gandalf's
23rd.
letter is like, okay, yeah. So, but in September, right? Am I right? In September? Okay. Gandalf's letter is, let's see. I'm looking at it here.
It's dated Mid-Year's Day. So that would be like...
It's dated Mid-Year's Day, but he says like leave the end of July at the latest. So you're like, oh my gosh, they would have missed all of this with the Dark Riders and all this. They would have been in Rivendell by now. Like, Butterbur, you screwed us. You screwed us, Butterbur.
Which again is, I think, something that almost goes back to his military service. The idea of, and this is something that happens in Wheel of Time as well. How many times do
a late letter?
Yeah, a late letter, or it is legitimately we're fighting a battle and then bad shit happens because we got bad intel because some clerk somewhere screwed up. And it's fascinating, and I find it interesting that it's basically all of these guys who did military service have this in their writings. It's very strange to me, but it's very consistent.
Well, I mean, it is a truism of especially military operations because things happen, getting a message a few minutes to a half hour to an hour late can have a big difference. I mean, you see that throughout history. I mean, Gettysburg is an interesting, the Civil War actually has a lot of interesting examples because messages were often supposed to be sorry, caveat, little side story here. Messages and triggers were often like, hey, when you hear the sound of the cannons, start your attack, right? And there's this weird sort of thing. It's called an auditory shadow. It has to do with weird environmental conditions. And there are several major battles in the Civil War that went differently because weird ambient environmental conditions made it so the guy who was like on the other side of a ridge a few miles away never heard any of the crazy artillery bombardment and cannons and stuff happening on the other side, and never started his attack. And it's really, really interesting historical stuff. But all right, sorry, aside, back to something I want to bring up here. Mainly,
I had something I wanted to add to this whole thing.
Yeah.
So with them getting the letter from Gandalf, the one thing that was different about the movies is that we knew what was going on with Gandalf during this segment, during this part of the story. Here, it's a total mystery. We don't know what happened to Gandalf. And the hobbits are asking, did the writers do something? What's going on? And so, like, when I was first reading this, I was like, what the hell is going on? What happened to Gandalf? And we don't learn this until book 2, when they get reunited, and he recounts the story with another particular wizard, who I will not spoil, because I'm sure nobody knows the story of Lord of the Rings.
No, I agree.
True.
But that's another movie change that I was fully down with the first time I saw it, in part because I thought that combat, they split it. So they still do the Council of Elrond, and then Gandalf is there able to explain how he got away. Or maybe he doesn't do it at the council. He relates it in a flashback to Frodo.
Yeah.
Like, where were you? So there's still that reveal element that happens in Rivendell. But the initial fight, so the initial part where Gandalf is captured and detained, with the two wizards fighting, and the two staffs, and was it Orthanc or Isengard, that whole tower?
Yeah,
I thought that was I thought that was out of obsidian. It was a John Howe or Alan Lee pictured to the end, and I was giddy when I saw that, because I thought that was so well done. And we get a little bit more info drop here in the film, whereas here we get a mystery.
Frodo's Gadfly Friction brings up Frodo's dream. So Frodo does have a dream that does give some of these details, not nearly as clearly as the movie does, right? The movie, obviously, because you can see it and you know the faces and all the things, like, it becomes very, very obvious. But the seeds are laying in the story here, as Gadfly Fiction points out. That's a good thing to bring up. Okay, so I'm going to read this because I love it. One, it's an inversion of the common saying, but also it's just so good. So all that is gold does not glitter. Not all those who wander are lost. The old that is strong does not wither. Deep roots are not reached by the frost. From the ashes of fire shall be woken. A light from the shadows shall spring. Renewed shall be blade that was broken. The crownless again shall be king. It's a postscript by Gandalf in his letter, designed, I think, to give something for Frodo to validate the Strider that they meet. And ultimately, this really is why they end up agreeing to go with Strider, right? Because he says that I'm Aragorn. We already talked about that. And he quotes a piece of that same poem back to them, right?
And he's never read the letter. Like, he's never read
the letter.
Yeah. So, and I loved how Sam, being like the last line of what do you call it? I can't think of the word. Skepticism about Aragorn or Strider. He's like, how do we know you're the real Aragorn? I was like, well, I could kill you. I could kill you. And he gets up.
Love that line.
He gets up in an imposing height. It's like, I can kill you right now, and you wouldn't know it. So, like, he's got a darkness to him. He's been around.
Yeah. It's like, maybe you killed Strider, and he's like,
I'm afraid my only answer to you, Sam Gamgee, is this: if I had killed the real Strider, I could kill you, and I should have killed you already without so much talk. If I was after the ring, I could have it now.
I was like, damn,
so
that is definitely not Viggo Mortensen. That is Strider.
I wish that line had been in there, right? So we talked about the introduction of Strider in the movies. I think that they could have included that line, the doubt that he was the real Strider, and then that line. It was good. But
it's only a paragraph
movie,
later.
They bust in and they said, "I'll have your hide, Longshanks," and Aragorn kind of smirks at him, and I think he says like, "You have a stout heart, young hobbit," or something like that.
Yeah,
like,
yes, it is.
I'm impressed by your bravery, but I don't think you're that bright.
Yep, stupid is as stupid does, young hobbit.
Yeah. So well, Nathan and the chat, I have been looking for an answer for this question for probably 15 years now. So we know from later in the book that Bilbo is the one that wrote the poem about Strider. When did Bilbo meet Strider for the first time, such that he would have written this poem? Because I can only think.
Did he write the poem?
I didn't know that Bilbo had written that.
He wrote the poem about Gilgalad.
No,
yeah, Bilbo translated the poem about Gilgalad.
He translated the poem about Gilgalad, but Bilbo wrote the poem about Strider. In an upcoming chapter, Frodo will mention the poem, and Bilbo will say something like, "Well, of course I know the poem. I'm the one that wrote it." So.
Well, Bilbo's been in Rivendell for like the last 17 years, right?
Yeah, but I don't think. But would Gandalf have?
That's actually.
Would Gandalf Strider would have been around Rivendell that whole time, right?
That is fair.
He would have.
17 years is a long time. I don't know if that's the right thing.
And Bilbo did go on adventures.
Yes, Bilbo went. Bilbo was in Rivendell both on the way to the Lonely Mountain and on the way back from the Lonely Mountain.
Yeah, right, so but he wasn't on
top of when he traveled there after his departure from the Shire.
Right, but after the events of The Hobbit, though, he did go on other adventures too.
Okay,
I don't believe he spent the entire 60 years in Hobbiton.
I will say that Matt is. I think he's read this book. He's read this series probably more than Dane's read The Wheel of Time. So it seems like he's giving the same answer there that he probably would have written it in Rivendell.
Yes, you got. Let me finish though. So did they?
Yes,
did they know the poem? Did Gandalf write the poem knowing that they would know the poem, and this was one of his ways to indicate that this was Strider without like actually writing it down, or did he write the poem thinking that they would read the poem? And just be like, okay, Gandalf says this guy is legit. I guess I'm struggling with what was the reason for writing the poem down, other than that Tolkien thought the poem was pretty dope. And he's right, the poem is pretty dope, but from a plot perspective, what was the reason?
I interpreted it as a passphrase, right? So if this is a poem, especially one that's maybe written, we'll say, okay, it's written by Bilbo about him, people who have been in Rivendell over the last couple decades, and no Strider and no Gandalf and no Bilbo would know this poem, but like the wider world is not going to know this poem, right? Then it would be similar to sort of Allied troops in World War II doing this sort of lightning flash kind of passphrase where like, hey, if I know the proper response to the thing that you start to say, well then you're legit.
Alex, I think the purpose of the poem, I think we can step back a little bit. I think we remove it a little bit from the plot and kind of what are a lot of the other poems in the book so far meant to do. And this is world building, right? This is supposed to give you a hint that Aragorn is a big fucking deal, right? So his name is Strider. That in and of itself doesn't sound very significant. He's got Aragorn. Well, who is he? And then there's a lot of great little hints in here about, a blade that was broken. It's not making the connection back to, Narsil. It's not naming Narsil. It's not saying that this was the sword that cut the ring off the finger. It's not saying that he is the, that he is the heir, but it's a little hint drop. So eventually when more is revealed about Aragorn, and then you go, well, wait, when was I first introduced to this character? You go back, you read that poem, and you're just like, he was leaving me breadcrumbs all along. That's what I think. the real motivation for including it in here. I don't think it really works as a code or
fair
a
enough.
secret passage, but.
I didn't mean that it was supposed to be specifically a code, but I do think that is the justification for why Gandalf could put it in there. He says, "Hey, it's this Strider guy, and here's a little bit of information about this Strider guy, and it's something that also has kind of an extra use." And again, going back to the idea that Tolkien had military, experience during a time where those types of things were 100% used to identify people in the dark between lines and things like that. It made sense to me. I didn't really question it beyond the utility there and why it would be in the postscript.
And a page later, it is mentioned, right? Because Aragorn does quote, all that is gold does not glitter. And then Bilbo or Frodo asks, did the verses apply to you then? I could not make out what they were about, but how did you know that they were in Gandalf's letter if you've never seen it? And he goes, I did not know, but I'm Aragorn, and those verses go with that name. Done. So it's confirmation for the reader. He is who he says he is.
Yes. All right. A Knife in the Dark, chapter 11.
I love that one.
Gosh. Okay. So we already talked about the intro. Brian, you already said your piece here. Awake, fear, fire, foes awake. The hobbits run off the Black Riders, which is awesome. And somebody already gave us the quote in the chat a while ago, but we can bring it up again. Let's see. So he says, "Open in the name of Mordor." That's the line that I stole for our thumbnail. Fatty Bulger says, no, I haven't got it. So he knows what they're after.
Let the little people
running away.
Sauron would deal with them later.
And yes, exactly that. So Sauron's going to deal with them later. And then cold open complete. Frodo woke from a deep, deep sleep. And we're back. We're back to the present, right? And we're back to the present while we're watching the sort of the fake rooms across the street. If we were looking at the movie sort of adaptation of this, which I think was done well, right? Do you guys agree? I think it was done in a visually arresting way. It was done very well.
It was terrifying, like the way they cut. You thought they were actually going to stab Sam, like because Sam, they edited the way they edited and everything. But it was just, once again, it was Peter Jackson's, history with horror.
Yeah. I think it was done well. Yes. Obviously, not that close to run of a thing in the books. They wake up, they find out that the other room was ransacked. Not everyone murdered by Black Riders, but probably just townsfolk who were in the conspiracy, going through and tossing the room, looking for the ring and looking for them.
They made it seem like they were sleeping, and they did still make it, bring up the deception that they were sleeping in there when they actually weren't, with the pillow, what they call it, the bolster pillow or something, to make it seem like they were still there and everything.
Yep. Knob comes in and is super proud of himself. He's like, "Yeah, I did this great thing. You will not believe it." And I can always just imagine Strider looking at him like, I mean, that's gonna buy us like 4 seconds and like really frustrate him.
It's too bad Knob didn't make it into the movie. I would have loved it.
Knob was fun. Knob was fun.
It's like my kid coming home with an art project. Look what I did.
You know who I think could have played Knob? I don't know if he's supposed to be younger or older, but Kenny Baker in Star Wars.
Okay. I guess now I'm imagining the cutscene in Empire Strikes Back where C-3PO removes the danger poster at the door. So then the stormtroopers go and they open the door, and then the ice werewolf thing reaches out and grabs him and pulls him in like
Wampa. Yeah.
Congrats, you killed 2 stormtroopers, C-3PO. Like, get him, buddy.
Okay. They leave town under some different circumstances, right? All the horses are chased away. So they like spend like half the day trying to figure out like, hey, how are we going to get out of here? We got to find a horse. They go and they buy a pony from Bill Ferny, the one of
He's a
the
Mordor.
bad
He's a
guys.
Mordor friend. He's a
Yeah,
Mordor
he's a
friend. That's what I called him in my
league.
headcanon.
Yeah, in league with the riders. But
I thought this was wholesome
he's such
too.
a shyster that he even sells them the thing on the side to like enrich himself a little bit, and then Sam chucks an apple at his face. Good stuff.
Yes. I thought this was a very wholesome part of the chapter. Like, we learned that I think it was Mary's ponies made their way back to the downs to look for Fatty Lumpkin, and so they were rescued by Tom Bombadil, and Tom Bombadil brought them to Butterbur, because Butterbur was like, Butterbur paid for the for the damages, for his own damages. He paid for the loss of the horses, especially to Mary, and he bought the thing from Bill, the pony, that abused pony from Bill Fernie. As we learned, they treat the pony much better, even though it's on the road, than Bill ever did when it was just his. So it was wholesome. It was a wholesome little arc I really liked. I thought it was great.
That will come back.
Same page there. That it's just a fun little aside. It's a very wholesome kind of thing to bring up. Like, we're on this great, grand, epic adventure, but let's take a minute to talk about these runaway ponies and how don't worry about them. They had a good life.
They still Mr. Butterbur has to do some stuff to redeem himself, right? Let's not forget that it was him forgetting to send off Gandalf's letter.
He screwed us.
Gandalf is going to roast his ass.
Yeah, exactly. That was even in the PPPS.
Yep.
So
I'll roast him.
But so Mr. Butterbur, he does good by the hobbits, right? He does, take on some of the costs. And I think what Tolkien's saying here, if you do the right thing, good things will happen to you.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I liked how they also built up Gandalf really quickly. Like Aragorn or Strider says, like this. I mean, Gandalf has been in much worse cases than this. Like, it just leaves the reader, leave it to the reader's imagination and wonder of like, what else has this guy been through? What else has this wizard been up to throughout the 300 lifetimes of men, as he says in the movie or something? You kind of wonder like how much of a life he's had, or what he's been through.
Yeah. Now, and this was kind of this apple, though. I would say that this could possibly be one of the most disappointing omissions from the movie. That means absolutely nothing in my head.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't completely omitted.
No,
it was changed though.
Yeah.
Oh, that's true.
Remember when they're like, "Where's second breakfast? Here's the apple."
The apple at Pippin.
Yeah.
Okay. But
I missed the second breakfast. I was hoping to hear about the second breakfast. We haven't heard about the second breakfast.
I disagree. That's not a change. That was an omission. They made up the second breakfast scene. It's a good scene. I like it, but
does second breakfast exist in the books though?
I think it was
saying that
pulled from
the throne apple. You can't draw
it's either pulled from the Hobbit or it's pulled from the prologue concerning hobbits, where it talks about the hobbits' love of food, including all the meals that they like, and I'm pretty sure second breakfast is listed there.
I'm sorry, but I'm with Alex on this. Sorry, Pips. Disagree with you, buddy.
Nope.
Like I just
wrong.
I love how it's what this is though. Is it's Sam that does it, and it kind of just he lets a frustration go that is kind of out of line with his character all of a sudden. But he just sits there like with a sudden flick, quick as lightning, and Apple left his hand. I mean, it's like left his hand.
It's like he didn't even do it. It did it
and
of its
hits
own accord.
Bill square on the nose. He ducked too late, and curses came from behind the hedge. And then he says, "Waste of a good apple."
I love that. I loved it.
So yes, I love the Hobbit being like, regretting the waste of food. Like, that's fantastic. But I also think that like it actually is kind of important for Sam's character, because what we consistently see is Sam being Frodo's protector, right? And so him chucking something and hitting Bill Fernie in the face on their way out of town, like that's very much in line with his character. And it's one of the few things that the story that the movies didn't get until you start getting into the Two Towers and Return of the King. They really neglected the beginning of Sam and Frodo's kind of friendship, I think. And again, not to criticize the movies. I think the movies are are like you said, Nate. I think probably the best trilogy of an adaptation, or however you want to say it. Like, I mean, they're fantastic. Especially the extended editions do an incredible job adapting the world and the broad notes of the story. Most of the characters are pretty well adapted. And so condensing an entire world and sort of legendarium into a trilogy is quite a feat. But man, I would have liked to have Sam chuck an apple at Bill Ferny. I don't. I think I should be allowed to say that, right? Like I should be allowed to say that.
Yeah.
And you know who should have played Bill Ferny? David Bradley. You know, nasty Argus Filch, nasty Walder Frey. Bill Ferny.
That honestly, that would be a very good Bill Ferny, I think. Kind of, or he also could have played the squinty-eyed Southerner, the Bill Ferny's friend.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Do we have much more to say here before we kind of obviously they go through the marshes, the Midgewater Marsh specifically, midges, those biting insects.
Sam is the one who says, "What do they eat when they can't get Hobbit?" It's not Mary.
Great line, and Peter Jackson put those poor actors through hell just to get that line, because they basically had to go through and walk through water, freezing cold, freeze their feet off, just in order to get that line. So,
and then they get to Weathertop. The Weathertop scene. So pretty different from the from the books. Again, I will say the comic relief and making Merry and Pippin kind of the cause of some of the ills for the party is
and
again
Sam.
I think an unnecessary. Yeah, I think it's an unnecessary damage where Frodo like in the movie, Frodo comes back and like, oh, you have a fire, put the fire out, right?
Well, yeah, it was the complete opposite. It was a complete opposite this time, because the thing that Aragorn or Strider said is the fire wards them off. Hence why in the movie you see him using the torch to ward off, the ring wraiths. But here's the other thing: Aragorn or Strider never left them here.
Yeah.
They knew they were approaching, so they said stay. He says stay close to the fire. And what happened was Frodo kind of, he just had the temptation to put on the ring, and he runs off, and that's where they, hit him with the Morgul blade.
But the difference in the film is it's not that they have a fire, yes or no. It's that in the film they go up Weathertop, and then they're halfway up, and you're on a big wide open plain, and you're basically any little fire is like a signal fire that could be seen for miles.
Yeah.
Whereas here in the story, I think they go into a dell.
They're
they're in a little valley, and then I think they even make mention that, or maybe they don't, but the fire that they make is, it's good in disguise. Right?
It's in a fire pit. In a little cleft. Yeah.
But what I'll say here, the film at least does it consistently. So this type of non-thinking action, a bit of buffoonery, is consistent with the character of Merry and Pippin that they've established. I think we already talked about how in the books they're way more of like a pair of bros who know what they're about, and they're actually competent. Whereas in the film, they're introduces the comic relief. They come along the journey kind of by accident, and they continue to make mistakes.
Yeah, they didn't. There was no conspiracy like in the books. Yeah. Instead, they run into him because they were stealing Farmer Maggot's food or his crop.
In order to give, if you thought you might have robbed Frodo of a good power moment in the Prancing Pony, well, they give it right back to Frodo, at least in the film, because he's the one who realizes the danger that they put them in by making the fire on Weathertop, and tells them to put it all out.
Yeah, but I kind of like the idea that they didn't start the fire until Strider told them to. Like they're a little more, they're aware of the danger and the situation that they're in. They're not just buffoons. I'll put it this way: it was Merry, right, who first learned independently of Bilbo's ring. Merry in a movie would never have been that guy, right? So maybe Pippin could have been turned into sort of the comic relief character. But I think that Merry is unfortunately, pretty damaged by a lot of this stuff in a movie adaptation. Not to, again, it works in the movie. I understand why movies do this for the comic relief. but it's a little disappointing that instead we don't see real. I guess I'll put it this way: Strider in the book makes a mistake. He says it himself. I shouldn't have taken all three of us up on Weathertop. We shouldn't have stood there for as long as we did. We highlighted ourselves to the riders that we saw on the road. So we actually we take away Strider's mistake. He's out scouting the area, doing stuff, and the dumb hobbits just do this thing. We take that away, and we instead make them into the comic relief. And I think it's a wound to the characters on both sides. Didn't necessarily need to be there.
I like the difference when Frodo had the ring. He actually tries to engage the Witch King of Angmar.
Get him!
Like he literally screams out right here, and this made me think of Mad in Eye of the World during that battle. Oh, Elbereth, Gilthoniel, and then he tries to go for their feet, and no damage, and that's basically when they, when he gets stabbed in the shoulder.
All right, so we talked about this stuff about Gil-galad. Does anyone want to read not the second longer one? The second longer one is probably too much. Where Aragorn does the sort of long story. But does anyone want to read?
I got it.
Okay. I think it's great. I think it's fantastic.
The one that Sam recites. Okay, all right, I got it right here.
Showing his depth and he's an interesting character.
Gil-galad was an elven king, of him the harper sadly sing, the last whose realm was fair and free, between the mountains and the sea. His sword was long, his lance was keen, his shining helm afar was seen. The countless stars of heaven's field, that sounded familiar, were mirrored in his silver shield. But long ago he rode away, and where he dwelleth none can say. For into darkness fell his star, in Mordor, where the shadows are.
And then we get the thing that one of you guys brought up, that Mary is like, don't stop. Like, that's a great story. And then Aragorn, or Strider, is how he's still given his speaking credit in this chapter. Is saying, hey, maybe we shouldn't speak that name. Maybe we shouldn't talk about Mordor.
Don't utter the word Mordor. That was another big thing that just made me think of Harry Potter, Voldemort. Do not utter the word Mordor. Just kind of like in the Wheel of Time, don't utter the word, was it Shaitan? Don't utter that word. Don't utter Voldemort.
You said it. You said the thing.
No, I said it. Oh, it's the knights who say "knee." No, just kidding. But let's go back a page, guys.
Not speak that name so loudly.
Let's go back a page because we talk about some foreshadowing. The hobbits are losing weight, part because
hiding those belts. Yeah, and then I have an issue with an issue with Song of Ice and Fire with Samuel Tarly, because like he's running away from the White Walkers and he never loses any weight. I'm like, George, come on, George.
Right, Brian, we got to pull this up. Jacob Ironsides is calling you out. You're not appropriately rolling your
Mordor. Sorry.
Yeah, you need.
I can't do it.
You need to get more of that.
No,
say it right. Say it right.
Well, if he rolled the R's, then we would be on here for an additional.
Region. Mordor.
Also, make sure your teeth are closed and you only kind of like hiss, like so you sound like Galadriel. Brian, you are 100% right. Every time I read like him talk about how fat Samuel Tarly is, I'm just sitting here like, can we get one of the maesters to check this motherfucker's thyroid? Like,
I mean, let's be honest. Samuel is a George insert of himself, kind of.
Yeah. Jesus Christ,
dude who's just doing good stuff. Yeah. That's a good point.
He made it all the way to the Fist of the Firstman, comes back, doesn't lose a fucking pound.
I also like the other thing. So right before he says, "Do not speak that name so loudly," going to Mordor, cried Pippin. I hope it won't come to that.
No. And there's your comic relief.
We're not going to come to that, guys.
There's your comic relief because there he says something stupid.
Pippin.
He'll do
Pippin
other things that are stupid.
relief.
There's another one, and I forget if it's in this chapter or if it's coming up. Where
it's coming up.
You know the one I'm talking about, where Sam is they say, "Man, I really don't want to be a warrior."
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
he does. Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
A wizard or a warrior, and he's like, I don't really want to do that.
No,
That would suck.
And then we're thinking about somebody carrying, the elven warrior who's raiding a certain, orc tower. But no spoilers, guys. All right. It's just a great chapter, right? So they're going on, and then unfortunately, so the movie gets it right in terms of basically what happens at Weathertop. The stab to the shoulder, and Frodo goes down, right? And that takes us into Flight to the Ford. And at this point, when I was reading this, I just got to throw this out there. You guys tell me your thoughts. At this point, while I was reading this, I was like, I couldn't pry myself away from it. Like, this just keeps being just awesome. Like, you're reading through Flight to the Ford in my version of this, if I can say this, page 209 to page 227. Not even 20 pages. And you're just like, right. You just can't. You're just like, why are there not more of this? This is so good.
That was me this morning. That was me literally this morning reading this, because I needed to. I procrastinated reading this for the stream. So sorry.
But seriously though, you're saying just 20 pages. There is so much in what we've been discussing. There's so much information packed in this section. Flight to the Ford seems like it should have been not 20 pages, but 40 pages. But it's
like an hour.
Tolkien
in the
contained
audiobook,
it,
right?
Yeah. But Tolkien contained it so perfectly in 20 pages. He gave an immense amount of information, introduces another character. It
references back to The Hobbit. It introduces a new character. It has just epic scenes. There's world building. There's poetry. I mean, I feel like we're talking about the intro to the Princess Bride here, where it's like, fencing, fighting, giants, true love.
Right.
It's the greatest movie of all time.
I'll try and stay awake.
Greatest movie of all time. It is. Greatest movie of all time. You guys all heard it.
No. We're talking about the greatest movie of all time.
There's
we're talking about one of the greatest books of all time. This is the White Cloaks channel. It's one of the greatest books of all time.
Yeah. There is one significant issue that I have with this chapter, and I just discovered it as I was listening to it. I always assumed that the name was like Glorfindel, legendary elven warrior. Like, and it turns out it's Glorfindel, which is just terrible.
It is terrible. I refuse to read it like that. It's Glorfindel.
Glorfindel, like Rivendell, like one of the baddest motherfuckers to ever walk Middle Earth.
Just give us that just one more time. How is it? Glorfindel? What is that?
Glorfindel.
Oh man, which translates into like the blonde-haired one or something like that, right? Like
So the joke is he's one of the few Noldor elves that have blonde hair. So even legendary elvish societies are like football teams in that they call the one guy with long blonde hair sunshine hair or sunshine. Like, this is a universal thing across society that everybody with long blonde hair is identified by that feature.
It's just Remember the Titans.
Yes, that is exactly what it is. This was Sunshine in just Lord of the Rings.
That was Gosling, wasn't it?
Yes, that was baby.
That is post-Breaker High, but pre everything else. Ryan Gosling.
Gosling was the cornerback that couldn't cover, because the meme is always I don't care that Ryan Gosling is an incredibly successful actor and an incredibly a sex symbol. He's still the reason that the fucking high school team couldn't cover the spread and kept getting killed by the shotgun.
It's Kip Pardue is the actor who played
Sunshine.
Who played Sunshine?
Sunshine.
Oh, okay.
I don't know who that is. Maybe he's never done anything else. Certainly nothing as notable as being Sunshine in Remember the Titans. Great movie, by the way.
Yep.
Never let it be said that the White Cloaks are just a bunch of bigots and racists.
We're more than, we're
Great fucking movie.
much more than that.
I learned something today.
Oh man, Flight to the Ford. Holy shit! Like what a roller coaster, right? I mean,
I like how the first thing he says is, "What has happened? Where's the Pale King?" And they're like, "What the hell are you talking about, dude?"
Buddy, there was nothing pale about those folks. Like there was all black.
Yeah. No, nobody else saw what he saw. Which okay, what do you guys think here? This is a thing that's been said about the Peter Jackson movies for a long time. The fact that the like the Eye of Sauron is not in the books.
No,
I will say I think that there's enough in the books that about Sauron sort of seeing and things like that. Like I think there's some stuff, and we may not have talked about this in the first 6 chapters, but it does get brought up there. And the hesitation to say the name Mordor, to talk about certain things, like I don't know. I've never had a problem with the Eye of Sauron the way it was portrayed in the movies. I don't know. Any of you guys have issues?
no.
Well,
I mean, he's literally called the Eye in the book, like especially I think much later in this. So I think Frodo sees a vision of that in a way.
He does see
several times where they say like the eyes of Sauron are always upon us. So no issue.
It's spoiler. I don't have an issue with it. I have an issue with how early it comes into play because he doesn't get it until the breaking of the fellowship chapter, the last chapter in this book, where he's up on top of Amon Hen, and he has the ring on, and it says, "Suddenly he felt the eye. There was an eye in the dark tower that did not sleep. He knew it and it became aware of his gaze, and a fierce, eager will was there." So it's there.
In the film, correct me if I'm wrong, when he puts it on by accident in the Prancing Pony.
Yep.
You get to see the eyes, but that's the first. That's the first time, and presumably every time before that the ring was ever worn by Bilbo or by Frodo, Sauron did not see them.
Right. I like the idea that Bilbo's been like having that experience the whole time, and he's just like, "This is probably fine."
Right.
Yeah. My fun cheeky pranks are totally good and not harming anything.
The Sackville Baggins is down the road. Better put on this fucking ring.
Yeah, exactly.
Giant flaming eye. I need to get down the road real quick. Then I'll pop it off.
I had no idea the Sackville Bagginses were kind of based off of his dislike of the Normans.
Wait, what?
I had no idea.
Did we establish that the last time?
Did we establish that? I thought we just talked about Sackville being a bunch of trashy people. And
I think
the name.
You said SOBs, Pips.
I did bring that up, and I still think SB. Yes, I think it's there.
Yep.
I like it. It's now headcanon.
So I've got a quick question, and sorry to bring this back to the movie again, but there is a couple of changes in the film as it relates to Flight to the Ford. What do you guys think about the gender swap, Arwen for Glorfindel or Glorfindel?
I'm good with this. And yes, everybody now has to pronounce it Glorfindel in as goofy a voice as you can.
All right.
The major difference between what happened in the movie. So she's riding with. So Frodo is completely. He has completely lost his agency. He's got glassy, pale eyes. He's like, like he's turning into like a zombie, whatever.
Yeah. So that was the second thing that I was going to ask. Is so here in the books he's riding on Glorfindel's horse by himself.
Yeah.
Whereas in the book, or sorry, in the film, it's giving a lot of agency to Arwen.
And he's telling, and what's funny is Glorfindel says, ride, and Frodo is just like, I can't do it. So he commands the horse to flee, and then the horse, flees, and you get the very similar type of chase.
That's why Pips hates this. He's
that's
basically
my
robbed.
problem. is that
Glorfindel's
it
horse.
took the agency from Glorfindel's horse. It was such a great horse. It's so good. It was off there. It was prancing. It was beautiful. It was majestic.
Yeah,
I don't know. I feel like
I
feel like Arwen's horse was the star of that scene. To be honest,
yeah. I have to get going in a minute. So I just wanted to say this. Like, I liked how different this was at the Ford. So like he gets there, and you know the same thing happens. Like he actually, there's a point where the I think it's the Witch King again raises his hand and causes Frodo's blade to shatter, kind of like what they showed in Return of the King with Gandalf. I mean, the Gandalf's sword doesn't break like in the movie, but it was kind of them taking that and putting it with Gandalf in the extended version. So we got to see that. But then what's funny is the rest of the party catches up to the Ford, and they're the ones with they're waving the fire around, scaring the horses into the Ford. That causes, because there were only three. There were only three wraiths on the Ford when it was coming down. They scared the rest of them onto the Ford, and that's how everything played out. And then, of course, that's how book one ends. And we got to see them take off their hoods and everything. They're wearing like gray and was it white and gray robes underneath, and they're wearing helms underneath the black cloaks and everything, the black attire.
All right, if you have to go, first of all, can you send me a link to your stream that's going to start in about 10 minutes, and we'll post that in the in thing. If you can't post it yourself, I'm not 100% sure.
I already posted it on your server.
All right, so everyone, when we're done here in a couple of minutes here, we're getting to the end of chapter 12. Go check out Brian. He's about to go talk Star Trek, right?
Yeah, rest of season 1 that we didn't talk about last time. So same guest as before, and I can't wait to talk about it.
All right, well, go check him out. But before you leave, can you agree that the biggest crime of the movie adaptation of The Flight to the Ford is that we didn't learn about Tom and the troll? Sam's poem about Tom and the troll and the leg bone.
Oh. The boner. Yeah, it is a loss to all civilization. Like, that would have been epic and very memeable. Very
I will
memeable.
say, again, the audiobook version of this is so good. It's just fantastic. He did a wonderful job with all the poems and the songs. But even reading it, like, it's just a really fun, charming poem. Yeah. All right, we'll let you go here. Do you have any final things you want to say, and then you'll have to duck out, and we'll finish up without you in a couple minutes.
Well, I want to say thank you for having me. This was an epic stream. Thanks for putting this together. I want to keep reading this, but I have to finish another book I'm reading. It's called The Great Hunt. And once I'm done with The Great Hunt, I actually want to resume and read finish Lord of the Rings. And then after that, then resume Wheel of Time or whatever. So yeah. So once again, thanks for having me. I can't wait. I don't know if I'm going to be doing a book stream next week, because I still have 16 chapters left. I might have to postpone another week. So
dude, knuckle down and do the work, man. Like, quit it with the excuses.
Say, dude, you got Picard coming up, man. You're gonna.
I'm working. Actually, that's my video I'm working on.
Is terrible, just like the first 2 seasons. It's gonna be bad.
I'm working on a Picard video. Why I'm watching it. Why I'm going to watch it and cover it. And so I'm halfway done with it. Hopefully, I'll get it up by tomorrow. That's the other big thing I'm doing right now. And you guys should all watch it and get my insight. So,
all right.
But other than that, thanks for having me. This was a blast. This is a great series. Keep it up. Hopefully you guys will have me on again. I'd love to talk Lord of the Rings.
Well, we'd love to have you on again, and we'll. I think next week we might have next week actually we're going to be watching part of the movie. Basically, the first book 1 of the movie. So we'll really talk about that. But also, I think going forward, we'll have some more people from the Discord and from our subscribers. But we might have you back on again. So thank you again for coming out.
All right. Take
you,
care
Brian.
and stay incorporeal.
See you, Brian.
All right.
All right.
So to answer Gadfly's
And then there were 4.
statement, Gadfly earlier
Lost Fatty Bulger.
mentioned, I see we skipped a bit. And no, Gadfly, we're not skipping a bit.
All right, which Gadfly thing here?
He said, I see we
you
skipped a
find
bit about Strider being a healer, the true and noble, like all
No,
true
we need to talk
and
about that.
noble kings.
too. Yeah.
I mean, this chapter, like we were talking about right at the beginning, it's so meaty. And the fact that they don't sit there and really get on the way for this fortnight of a trip for another 2 or 3 pages, I think, it's just unbelievable to me. I mean, it's like he goes and he's researching the area, and then he comes back.
By the way, fortnight, 2 weeks. Anybody
Yes.
who's reading this with us, a fortnight is 2 weeks. So if
Okay,
anyone
dude,
is curious,
I'm so glad that you clarified that, because the way that you announced that, the way that you announced fortnight, I was legitimately like waiting for you to announce that we were doing a fortnight stream, and I was like, "What the fuck are you talking about?"
it's in the book. Tolkien, he's talking about queer folk and faggots of wood and fortnights. You just gotta get yourself in.
Yes, that's right. Self-insert the current modern day terminology.
Yep. 4 and several queer faggot fortnights later.
Look, you know what? I'm just going to leave that joke.
Are we?
That is
Are we still streaming?
Right,
are we still live?
We haven't been taken down yet. Let's continue with.
Oh man, but yeah, the fact that he sits there and he goes out, finds out enough information to get his bearings all in order, and then says, "Okay, take care of him, keep him warm, keep the wound dressed. I'll be back." And then he goes off again, and it's just kind of like there's an urgency to it, but he's not going to sit there and make a move until he knows what he's dealing with, and it's just such an interesting thing, because anything being written about this today would be like, oh well, we just got to go without any thought of what's ahead of them at all, and that's not what Strider's about. He's about knowing exactly what's around him. He's like, I don't know where the other 4 are. There were 5 here last night, but we're gonna figure this out, and and then they finally push on.
Matt, great comment. great comments.
Well, they were burning the homosexual people before they went to play the video games.
Yeah, just casually, let's throw a couple on the fire.
So again, here, 18 pages in my version of this book, right? Again, the old version of this book. What year was this one printed? Let's take a little look here.
I'm gonna say 65.
No, I think this one. So originally 1954, 1965, and then this one specifically was a Book of the Month Club. 1995 was this one that I have. So it's a reprint of the very original one at this cover. But still, I mean, it's been around. It's been around the world for a while. So 19 or 18 pages, whatever I said it was, and they still managed to fit in world building, right? Like, so Gadfly fiction, and you're talking about the healing and all this stuff, right? And he does a whole thing about this flower was from the men of the West who had camps, in the woods and stuff here. And
the flower only grows where the
the density of material and information that comes in, and it doesn't feel like a lore drop, right? Like it never feels like you're just being assaulted. Here's a pile of books for you to read on the history of this world. Instead, the story is just going on, and you're just immersed in the world. It's so good.
Yeah, it's taking
and if you want to read about the pile of books that you have to read to learn what it all means, go fucking buy the pile of books. They're there for you if you want it.
Yeah, they're there.
Yeah. Well, there was. I love the part where he's sitting there. He's like he's talking about this herb that they brought over, and then he sits there and he puts it in the water to sit there and make sure he can clean the wound with it some more. But everybody else is healed or kind of refreshed with the aroma too.
The smell, just the aroma.
It's just an additional thing about the world that you're just kind of like, oh, okay, I totally get that. Like when I sit there and like make some tea, and everybody else in the house will sit there and smell it, and they're just like, oh, that's soothing. I like that.
There's a line in here that just gets dropped about how it is that all this worldly knowledge is known and introduced to the reader. The heirs of Elendil do not forget all things past, said Strider, and many more things than I can tell are remembered in Rivendell. Again, I think, Dane, you brought up the idea that it was just foreshadowing the significance of Strider, right? Like, so, reinforcing the idea that he's the heir of Elendil. Who's Elendil? The guy that we learned about with Gil-galad, the guy that we shouldn't even have a conversation about the story yet, because it's too sort of significant. It's too sad and dark and all these other things for us to have while we're still under the threat of the enemy, right? Just such great stuff happening. And then we have the trolls.
Troll horde.
The troll.
I love it. Yeah, the troll with the bird nest behind its ear. This one, okay. Merry and Pippin were comic relief here. They come back. They had been scouting ahead, trying to show their bravery, and they run back, and they're like, oh, there's trolls and stuff. And then Strider comes up and he like bangs a tree branch against one of the trolls, and he's like, these trolls are stone, you idiots.
Yeah.
You should have known there's a bird nest behind one of their ears. That's a dead giveaway.
Right. It's like they go to scout, and the first rule of scouting, observe. Totally failed. Well, and I love it. He's like, you're forgetting you're not only your family history, but all you ever knew about trolls. It's like,
yes,
just such a simple way to sit there and not necessarily insult them, but it's just like, it's
a pretty cutting insult. Like, you doofuses.
It is, but he also it's delivered in sort of a charming way, right? So Strider walked forward unconcernedly. Get up, old stone, he said, and he broke his stick upon the stooping troll. Like, it's it's such a good mix, right? So we have the reference to the Hobbit that has its own totally different tone tied into it, right? And then we have Sam giving this silly poem sort of thing about trolls, and then we have them getting back to the road, right? And the fear of the road and the Black Riders. And they hear a sound on the road, right? Which this is the first time that Sam was not the one who heard or perceived the rider, and it's not a threatening rider, right? It's we learn that this is it's
a clippity clip.
Clippity clip, exactly. It's a fun horse, guys. It's a fun horse.
This is how Pips walks.
Exactly. Very dainty, elegantly.
I don't know. That horse can motor when it matters.
Exactly. That's exactly right, ladies.
You heard him, Trip.
My wife is gonna get pissed at me. All right. She doesn't watch any of our streams. It's fine. Well, she was there for Nerd Boreal's stream. Actually, she's reading The Great Hunt, so she's going through it.
Oh, that's cool.
All right, Gil. Say it again, Alex. I can't say it well enough. You gotta give us the Glorfindel. Okay.
Especially with this nasally congested voice right now. Just sounds
exactly.
extra special.
It does sell it better. So he shows up. We put Frodo on the horse. Frodo doesn't want to go on the horse, but he sees reason. They're all only in danger because he's there, right?
Yep. I also I love that Glorfindel drops the little bit of knowledge that oh yeah, I saw 5 of the riders on a hill and I just ran at them and they all got scared and ran away. Like, but what do you mean all 5 of the Black Riders just like ran like little bitches from you? Like, who is this guy? And like
that, yeah.
Like they don't really go into it, but like Glorfindel is a fucking badass. Like,
well, they introduced it even in the earlier statement, right, where Elrond received news that troubled him. Some of my kindred, he's talking about how they heard about it, and then there are few, even in Rivendell, that can ride openly against the Nine. But such as there were, Elrond sent out north, west, and south. So he's basically like, no big deal. But even for an elf, I'm basically the most badass motherfucker.
So in the First Age, Glorfindel killed a Balrog. Like they ended up killing each other. It was actually sort of a mirror of the Gandalf story, but like even among the elves, there's the saying, like, if you're going to lose a fight but you're going to fight valiantly, they'll say like, I will fight like Glorfindel against the Balrog. So like his name is literally synonymous with like badass motherfucker in elf. So yeah, Glorfindel's a fucking dog.
Yes, and this is not how they created Mithril, by the way.
No, that is not how they made Mithril.
There wasn't lightning in a tree and a bunch of SJW nonsense. No.
Glorfindel did not get hit by lightning while fighting a Balrog under a tree.
And that's the only way that elves can live now.
Oh,
yeah, nice. And Jacob Ironside, you are 100% correct. He killed a Balrog, and they brought his ass back for more. Like, so Jonathan R., to answer your question, I do not think Glorfindel beats Galadriel in a 1v1, but those are, if those two were to go at it, those are probably the top 2 dogs left in Middle Earth at this point.
This does raise some questions, but I think we should save it for when we get into the composition of the fellowship, about who actually gets sent and what the options are. Because I believe from memory, Glorfindel was mentioned by Elrond as a possible companion. But let's save that for the next stream, considering we're kind of at the end of this one. But let's be sure to talk about that.
Yeah, okay. That's a good thing to bring up. Frodo's on the horse, and they start to ride. Everything's going pretty well until they kind of come out of the trees and they can see the ford, and an ambush is lying in wait for them. Right. So it's all 9. Right. All 9 of the Black Riders have assembled. 5 behind them, 4 in front. If I remember right, does that sound right to you guys? I think 5 behind and 4 kind of came from the side. 2 rode straight at him, 2 rode to cut him off. And I think one of you had brought up before that Glorfindel orders the horse specifically, right? And you get sort of the Gandalf, fly, you fools, fly. He called fly. The enemy is upon us. What I liked about this scene was Frodo. So by Elbereth and Luthien the Fair, you shall have neither the ring nor me. So him defiantly shouting
Come at me, bro.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, honestly. What did you guys think of this scene?
Loved it. You know, if you're especially, you know, if you're sort of you're more familiar with the movies, this really gives Frodo some, you know, some more badass points, if you will.
100%.
Well, even as he's kind of, you know, he's being pulled by them before the horse kicks into gear. You know, he reins in there, and then just waits to kind of almost stare them down as they're approaching him. I mean, he's just like, you know, I'm going to draw my sword. And then Glorfindel's like, okay, well, I got to talk to the horse now. You know, but otherwise he was going to take him on. Right. And, you know, the fact that he sits there and he's still defiant, even though he's under the influence of this Morgul blade and all that, you're right. The character of Frodo is absolutely enhanced in this by just his sheer bravery. There's no way he'd win that fight.
I was gonna say he ain't winning, but the fact that he squared up for it is.
And that was.
Let me play devil's advocate here, because I appreciate how they changed this in the film. I know we're always kind of going to go back and forth between that, but I get it, because what the film establishes is, one, that the wound that Frodo receives in his shoulder is more serious than here, because he's basically incapacitated by it. It gives Arwen, who's riding the horse, you know, something to do. It's a good kind of chase scene. And then the final thing, which is the water in the stream rising and forming the horse shapes and taking out all the Dark Riders. In the film, that's at least implied to be the result of magic that Arwen is basically casting. She starts incanting. And it might have been tied to spells that were already worked on the land. Whereas here, it's kind of a little bit Deus Ex Machina, or comes out of nowhere, and explained in a later chapter that it was indeed, you know, the realm of Rivendell defending itself, or spells that have been placed on the area. So kind of like dumb luck you made it this far. But I understand.
I mean, they
understand
knew
the
whole
changes.
time. They knew the whole time that getting across the ford was safety, right? It wasn't explicitly spelled out, but I think that was understood for the reader.
Okay. But these are all changes, I think, that the filmmakers did wisely.
And I would actually agree with you there, because how would you convey the fact? I mean, we've had 2 chapters now of this blade, and or chapter and a half of the effects of this blade being told to us in the narrative sense. In the movie, you've got to contain all of that communication in a 10-minute span, 15 minutes, however long it took in the movie. And so how do you convey that? Well, you got to show the effects on Frodo, and to sit there and have him being defiant here all the way at this point would defeat everything you're trying to communicate in 10 minutes. So I think
whereas if he's
actually well met.
If his breathing is shallow and he's got eye boogers and he's turning kind of into the shadow world kind of stuff, I mean, that just ups the stakes, and it's more like he not only does he have to escape them, he needs to get to Elvish medicine. He needs to get to Elrond to be healed of this before it's too late for him. So,
so I'm going to say that there is a middle ground option that was available there. There's a middle ground option which. So as much as we might like Glorfindel, I mean, he's a great dude, great elf. You know, I just love him to death. But I understand the switch to Arwen. One, it's a known quantity that you have to have something for the girlfriend that you drag along to go see this movie to enjoy, and so you gotta create the romance, right?
Why did we cast Orlando Bloom and Viggo Mortensen?
So exactly. Right?
Orlando Bloom was a nobody when they cast him. Like he was not the sure thing that he became.
Okay, 100%. But the attributes that Orlando Bloom brings to the table was obvious immediately.
Yes. But anyway, so like I get the change to focus more on Arwen And Glorfindel doesn't really do a whole lot in the rest of the Lord of the Rings story, right? Significant and important character in Tolkien's world, but not so. Kind of like Tom Bombadil, right? Like didn't really do much in the rest of the series. So the swap for Arwen for him, that makes sense to me, and I'm like, hey, I think that's good, or at least it worked really well. The one thing I'll say, they could have kept where Arwen puts him on her horse and then orders the horse to flee. Like that could have still happened.
Of course, right? You're making that argument.
Hey,
fucking horse.
Look,
the horse should have been
Tyler
the hero.
Was going to
the horse should have been the hero. But no, seriously. So the horse, tell the horse to flee. And what I think you could have done to get to what Nate was saying about how do you establish this, Dane, what you were saying about, how do you establish the magic behind the river? If they had given Arwen and the rest of the company the role that they had in the books of chasing the last couple riders into the river, if she had been chanting the magic kind of stuff right there, and you still could get Frodo on the other side, like drugged out of his mind, but still like drawing his sword and like, screw you, Mordor. And then Liv Tyler still saves the day, calling on the magic of the river to knock them all down. I think that is the middle ground that they should have done. It would have preserved Frodo's moment for the bravery and defiance, and still given Arwen the magic and stuff there.
Are there other riders? Sorry about maybe I missed this in but it's a page and a half where Glorfindel sends him on his way on the horse. I don't think the rest of the company's there because they don't have horses.
No. They come up afterwards. So right here, very end, with his last failing senses, Frodo heard cries, and it seemed to him that he saw beyond the riders that hesitated on the shore a shining figure of white light, Glorfindel, and behind it ran small shadowy forms waving flames that flared red, the red swords of the Barrow-wights that flared red in the gray mist and were falling over the world. The black horses were filled with madness, and leaping forward in terror, they bore their riders into the rushing flood. Their piercing cries were drowned in the roaring of the river as it carried them away. So essentially, Aragorn, Glorfindel, the hobbits essentially chased after the riders who had at that point, ran up, ignoring them, ran to the ford, chasing Frodo, but now on foot, they continue to chase down the riders and drove them into the river.
But even that, in a film sense, that would have been difficult to establish because just about the amount of distance that was implied to be covered in the horse chase.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Especially if they then didn't have horses of their own to kind of follow. And if they had horses of their own, then why the heck were they walking for the previous half hour of the film? So
it's not a very large distance. So in the movies, it makes it like Arwen runs her horse for like 3 days and nights to get to Rivendell, when in reality, it was a very short, you get out of the forest, you're approaching the river, and then you get across the ford,
And if I recall correctly too, from The Hobbit, from the troll scene to getting to Rivendell wasn't that far to begin with, right?
Yep.
So okay.
Mm-hmm. So anyway.
We made it.
That's my takeaway on the way that we could have done that. But overall,
I thought the way that they handled it was fairly good because there's a scene.
Oh, it's great.
well, let me finish the bit about Frodo not being brave. They almost have an X-Men 3 moment where, Elrond says something about it's a miracle that they got this far, almost as if shit talking Gandalf, and Gandalf basically says something like, that little hobbit is the bravest motherfucker that in this city at the moment, which was sort of how I always took it as, that was him acknowledging Frodo's bravery. And it's tough because it's really hard to emphasize, how much Frodo goes through and how brave he is, because so much of it is internal. But the Yeah, when Gandalf says something like, "Yeah, no, the strength of that little hobbit is the only reason that the ring got here in the first place," is to me sort of his clap back in defense of Frodo. But I get that it's not as significant and not as showy as the, him staring it down.
Yeah. Well, we're at the end, guys. We've made it to the end of the Flight of Ford. So as I turn my next page, it's book 2 we're getting into. Next week is actually not going to be book 2. Next Saturday, we should be doing, well, it might be Friday, it might be Saturday. We'll figure out schedules. Is going to be, we will watch the movie. So the Peter Jackson movie, we'll watch up to this point, basically. So this scene, Liv Tyler at the Ford, before the sort of fade to white and Frodo wakes up in Rivendell, right? That's where we're going to watch up to, and we'll do we'll post it on our Discord. We'll watch it there live, and we'll do sort of a conversation about the movies and the things they did right, the things that we maybe disagree with, but just a conversation about the movies in general, appreciating it. Extended edition, guys. The theatrical release is for chumps.
and that's the thing too. It's like we can go on and on about all the differences and everything, and what we liked about the differences, what we didn't like about the differences. But the fact of the matter is the movies are so well done and so honorable to Tolkien that we can easily overlook all these things.
Yeah,
it's just that's what we want.
Alex put me in my place once on one of the rewatches where he brought up the meats back on the menu, and you can quibble about why do orcs have menus, but since that's like basically the full extent of the criticism that you can lob at Peter Jackson and the Lord of the Rings trilogy, whereas that would have been item 763 in what we found wrong with Wheel of Prime. I think we can all feel very, very satisfied that at least in 2000, 2001, they knew how to make an adaptation, and they sure as shit don't know how to do that now.
Yeah. Well, with that, I think we've kind of reached the end of our stream. Like I said, next week will be a viewing on the Discord. So Discord link is on our channel page. And we'll post it out before we actually do that, so people who want to watch that. Otherwise, we'll be back on YouTube next week talking about the movie, and then the following week we'll get back in and start book 2 with what is the first chapter of book 2?
Many
meetings.
There we go, many meetings. So we started with many meetings, chapter 13, and we'll be moving on from there. It's been a lot of fun. So here, you know what? Nate, as our co-host, do you got anything on your channel that you're working on? I know that I'm going to continue bothering you about this Eye of the World sort of thing, because I'm trying to get you to do it.
It'd be nice to get off my ass and do it. Life keeps happening, so it's I do it. I do still intend to do this, but I've got initial cuts of audio tracks laid down for the vocal piece, so it's now just finding the background music and then editing all the audio together. But
I volunteer for any horse scenes that you need. I would make a great cloud. Or red.
You've got 2 empty halves of coconuts and you're clapping them together.
Right. Oh man. Yeah, no. But yeah, outside of that, just hopefully I'll be able to make the watch party next weekend, and and then I think the Sunday after that is when we're back with the Great Hunt with Brian.
Well, if he does his reading, he was implying that he might not finish.
Yeah, that's right.
All of us need. We'll bother him in Discord, guys. We'll get on him.
Yeah,
the Great Hunt needs to continue apace. He doesn't get to use the fact that we're making him read Lord of the Rings to slow down reading the Great Hunt.
That's true.
That's unacceptable.
Yes, fat, drunk, and stupid is no way to go through life, son.
An all-time brilliant mind.
I feel personally attacked.
Yeah. So we're going to be reading many meetings all the way through Bridge of Khazad-dûm.
Yeah.
I think
Yes.
so.
Yes.
All right. Awesome. Oh man, this book.
Great section. I know. Every time we read
love,
more, it's like it's just better than the last time.
Yeah,
I
love the first 6 chapters of this book. Period. They're great chapters, but the pace once you get out of Bree, just starts boom, 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 and you get a little reprieve with many meetings in the Council of Elrond, but man, this thing just takes off. I love this.
Yeah, Moria is going to be fun.
Yeah,
boy.
Alex, you're working on a video, right?
I am. Thank you for getting me the audio. It is coming along now.
Perfect.
You've seen the draft. You can't tell me that I'm not working on it.
You are working. It's guys, ladies and gents, it's going to be awesome. It's potentially the best produced thing that the White Cloaks has made. So
that's not saying much.
I think it. You know what? It may not be saying much, but it is saying something, and I think it's going to be good. You guys should all tune in for it. Dane, you've didn't you volunteer to stream on another channel here? Did that already happen, or is that coming up?
I have no idea. Did I?
I feel like you had said something that you were on somebody else's stream. Maybe I'm making that up. Otherwise, you'll see Dane next time. Same bat phone time, same bat channel.
That's right.
Your pipe. Killing me. All right, guys.
Might have to get some tobacco for this.
Does anybody have any final thoughts?
Nope.
No. All right, guys. Thanks for coming. Everybody in the chat, thank you for being here. Trip, Jacob, Dempsey, I think had to duck out. Daniel, a whole bunch of people who've been here. Matt, Gadfly Fiction, everybody who made this chat a lot of fun to talk this great series about. We'll see you next time. Walk in the light.